I worked at a national park for a few years in the American Southwest. I don't want to say the name of the park on here, but it's a pretty famous one. There's no way you haven't heard of it. I worked at one of the many information stations we have around the park. Mostly it involved handing out maps, explaining trails, and checking in guests for guided tours. Sometimes I got to give small tours and host educational talks about the history of the area and our local wildlife. We tended to hire quite a few seasonal staff during the busy season to keep things running smoothly. We didn't have as many visitors in the winter, so we could run on a skeleton staff. Typically, the trails get some snow in December, January, and February. It's not usually much, but it's enough to make the trails icy and extremely dangerous. The unfortunate part about working the winter season with a skeleton crew was that we all had to do a bit of everything. One day I had been tasked to restock the cafeteria display in the main lodge. We don't offer room services or meals like a hotel, but we do have a cafeteria where our guests can purchase pre-made food. I would have to get up at 4 in the morning to have the display stocked before it opened. Now, I'm not much of a morning person, so I asked my supervisor if I could do it that night instead. I had keys to the building and planned to go there after everything was shut down for the day. My supervisor was one of the lead rangers at the park. He said he didn't care when I got the cafeteria done, just that it was done before 6 in the morning. I took this to mean he knew I would be doing it at night, but judging by what happened later that night, he definitely forgot I was going to be there. I'll admit, I did start quite a bit later than I had planned. It was nearly 11 at night by the time I started restocking. I know that sounds pretty late, but I'm a night owl, and it was sort of nice to be able to work without anyone else there. I was only about 20 minutes into my task when I heard the cafeteria door open. I was in the back of the kitchen, but it was a heavy door, and there was no mistaking it. I knew only someone with a set of keys could be in here, so I knew it was one of my co-workers. I was about to check who it was when I heard my supervisor's voice. It sounded like he was talking on the phone. I heard him walk to the counter and grab something. It sounded like a yogurt cup, but that's not really important. I was still behind the kitchen door, but he was close enough that I could hear his half of the phone conversation. It might be important for me to say that the cafeteria lights are always on at the front counter, even through the night. So he truly had no idea I was back there. I thought I should probably just walk out with an armful of food for the counter so he would know he wasn't alone, but then they started talking about some strange things, so I stayed back. They were talking about footprints on one of the main trails in the canyon. Bare footprints. As in without shoes. In December. There was a light dusting of snow on the ground, so any strange footprints should have been easy to follow. I know there are some crazy hikers out there, but no way is someone hiking without shoes in this type of weather. At this point, I'm thinking they are talking about a missing hiker, but we hadn't had any reports of missing hikers lately. But then my supervisor said something odd. He said, "It's best to leave it well enough alone. It doesn't want to harm anyone." That was the word that stuck out to me. He wouldn't have described an animal as being barefoot, and he wouldn't have called a person it. I didn't know what to think. I scooted closer to the kitchen door so I could hear better. The conversation sounded tense. They weren't arguing, but they were close to it. My supervisor told the other person that their services weren't needed and that no one has had a negative encounter with the creature yet. Things got a little heated and I couldn't hear everything that was said, but I do remember exactly what my supervisor said before he hung up the phone. He said, "If you want to hunt it, go ahead. But you'll never find it, even with a fresh trail. A lot of people have tried." I waited until I heard the front door open and close before I stuck my head out of the kitchen. I definitely wasn't supposed to hear that conversation, but I had to know what they were talking about. However, I was left with more questions than answers. I wasn't able to put the story together until the following day at lunch when I was talking to one of my co-workers who had been working the morning shift in the cafeteria. She told me that a hiker had stopped and talked to her a little bit. He was heading out a couple of days early because of the trail conditions. He tried to hike into the canyon but had to turn back, and on his route back, he saw some footprints in the snow. Bare human footprints. He said he reported it to the ranger station and called the non-emergency police line to ask if there were any reports of missing people in the area because the rangers weren't taking him seriously. He asked my coworker if she heard of anyone who had gone missing. The hiker was convinced that there was someone out there wandering around the canyon without shoes. I didn't know what to think. I still don't know what to think. I haven't seen any strange creatures in the park myself, but from the little bits of information I overheard, I don't think these things want to be seen. I couldn't tell you what they look like, just that they have human feet, and according to my supervisor, they don't pose a threat to people. But I do know there is something out there. I work at the restaurant on West Country Road in Merrill, Wisconsin, and I don't want to mention any names, but it's just like they say, we're open late. So I'm like the low guy on the totem pole here, and I always get stuck closing up with this kid who's as lazy as all, but I need to keep this job so I don't complain. If he doesn't do it, I got to do it, but like I said, I'm not going to complain to my manager. I really wanted to get home that night because some days I've just had it, you know. And here it is after 3 in the morning and I'm still mopping up the floor while the other guy keeps going into the bathroom to avoid doing any work. So I grab the trash and haul it outside, even though I have done everything on my list. I got out to the dumpster, which is kind of in a shed with 3 sides, and I come around the corner and I see this thing scoot back behind the dumpster. I thought it might be a homeless guy or something because it's so late, so I just yelled, "Hey, by the way, I don't have a problem with anyone living on the street, but he needed to get out of there." Nobody answers me, so I stop because I've got to unlock the padlock and I can't see who's back there. For all I know, it's someone who's going to mug me. I didn't know what to do, so I just yelled, "I'm calling the cops." And then I hear a growl, really loud and mean-sounding, but it was so strange because I saw a person walk behind there. But maybe I was wrong because now it sounds like a big dog, that low growl they have. So I did something kind of stupid then. I just picked up a rock and threw it at the dumpster, thinking the noise on the metal would scare it off. But instead, the thing rushes out straight at me, and sweet Jesus, I never seen nothing like that thing before. It was on 2 legs like a man and bigger than me, but it looked like a dog's head on it with a muzzle and everything. And I could see teeth because it was snarling. I just dropped the bag of trash and ran for the door because my mind couldn't understand what the thing was, but I knew it was going to eat me. I got to the door, and that loser Stan had locked the lock because that's the policy here, after hours. You lock it, even if you're going out for just a minute. So I've got the key in my hand, but I'm shaking so bad I can't get it in the lock, and I can't see Stan nowhere. I looked over my shoulder and thank God that thing must have gone after the trash bag instead, because it wasn't behind me. I managed to get the key in the lock and got inside and locked it. I'm breathing so hard I thought I'd have a heart attack. I told Stan there was this weird creature like a werewolf out there, and he laughed at me. Of course, I guess I would have laughed if he told me that. But I can tell you right now, the thing was real. It was all covered with dog fur or wolf fur and had a big head like a dog and stand-up ears. I didn't get a good look at its paws, but its eyes were yellow and it had these big teeth. It was definitely walking on 2 legs because it came at me that way. I don't know about a tail. We left like 15 minutes later, but I wasn't parked near the dumpster, so I just hurried over to my car and got in and locked the doors. I cruised by on the road to the other side where you can see the dumpster, but the thing was gone. Or hiding behind it, maybe. I even told my manager about it because I don't want to work the closing shift no more, and he thought I was making it up. So the only thing I can think is maybe go over there some night when I'm not working and sit in my car facing the dumpster building with my camera ready. I figure I need a picture for anyone to take me seriously, and who knows, I might even be able to sell a picture like that to a magazine or something. I didn't believe in ghosts until I started working in this cafe near Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. The cafe's gone now, and I'll get to that later. I basically got a job there because I was going to school at OSU and it was right by campus. It was a little dingy place in a basement, basically, like you had to walk downstairs from street level to get there. It had a few tables and a little dining room and another room that had a small stage where local bands sometimes played. I didn't usually hear them because I worked in the really early morning. It opened at 6 and I had to get there at 5 to brew coffee and bake muffins. When I first started, I worked with this guy named Brad. He talked all the time about his girlfriend or his lack of a girlfriend, his classes at OSU, his roommate, everything. One day, though, he got sick and didn't come in. It was quiet in there without him, at least when I was opening the restaurant before any customers showed up. After a few minutes, I noticed noises. It sounded exactly like when Brad was there, except without the talking. Drawers opening and closing, the squeak the oven door makes, footsteps on the floor, banging like someone doing dishes in the sink. But when I looked around, of course, no one was there. Once people started to come in, I didn't notice anymore and forgot. The next day, Brad still hadn't gotten better, and it happened again. When I was making coffee, I heard someone walking around. A wooden spoon banging against the side of a bowl, the cooler door opening and closing. After I finished setting up the sandwich station, I heard the oven timer go off. I was sure I hadn't set the timer or put anything in the oven. I'd been planning to bake the muffins a little later. As I walked over to the oven, I felt a chilly place in the room. It was weird because it wasn't close to the air conditioning vent, and the AC wasn't on anyway since it was October. There really aren't any windows in the place either since it's the basement, so I couldn't think of anywhere the cold could be coming from except the walk-in cooler. I looked over at it and the door was closed. When I got closer to the oven, I noticed the smell of muffins. I opened it, and sure enough, there were muffins inside. Done perfectly. I took out the pan, trying to convince myself that I must have somehow made them without remembering. But I wasn't that tired. I was used to getting up at 4:30. I was sure I hadn't made the muffins, but then who had? Could someone have snuck in and made them while my back was turned? I couldn't make myself believe that. I knew I'd turned around a few times because I'd heard something. I would have seen the person unless they were invisible. What could I do? I kept getting ready for breakfast service and tried to tell myself nothing was wrong. As the day went on, I tried to be aware of any extra noises in the kitchen, but it was too hard with all the customers. Finally, right before my shift ended, it did get quiet for a while, but I didn't hear anything. I asked Samantha, who had the late shift, if she'd ever heard anything strange in the kitchen, and she looked at me like I was crazy, so I took that for a no. Brad still wasn't back the next day, and I was nervous but also kind of curious. I decided to see what would happen if I made the muffins, set up the sandwich station, and didn't make the coffee. I tried that, pretending I'd forgotten the coffee. I heard the noises, the footsteps, and dish banging like usual. I was about to give up and do the coffee when I looked over and it was done. 3 fresh pots of coffee sat on the dining room burners. See, the cafe offers bottomless serve-yourself coffee, so we have 3 pots that just sit there all day, and we make more whenever they run out. The machine is in the back, near the walk-in cooler, so I couldn't see it from the prep table and stove. But still, I would have noticed someone walking by me to bring the pots out to the dining room. It was weird, but not really scary, I guess. I started to think of the ghost as just another cafe worker, just one I couldn't see. After that, I didn't leave tasks for the ghost, but they got done anyway. Dishes in the sink appeared clean on the draining board. Muffins were made or placed in the display case. I even noticed a pot of coffee appear a few times during the day when we ran out. It was maybe a week before Brad returned. "Bet you missed me," he said. "Did you have trouble getting everything done while I was gone?" "I had help," I told him. "Have you heard any weird stories about this place?" "What do you mean?" he asked. I shrugged, thinking maybe he didn't know anything. "Well, there was this girl one time. She worked here like 10 years ago, I heard. Customers came one morning and she hadn't opened the cafe. When the next shift worker showed up, they found her dead by the cooler," he said. "What happened?" I asked, feeling a little chill run up my spine. No one knows, he said. Why, you ask? No reason, I said. I decided to keep it to myself. At least until now, me telling you. I worked there for another year or so, and then I got a job on campus. Around the time I graduated, they tore down that whole strip of buildings. I wonder what happened to the ghost. Where do they go when the place they're haunting goes away? I live in Florida now, but I used to own a campground near Grand Lake, Colorado. Grand Lake's a glacier lake, so it's cold. You can't really swim in it, even in the summer. But tourists come to go on boat rides around it because it's scenic, or to hike. So my campground was outside of town on a dirt road. We had 30 RV hookups, 10 campsites for tents, and 11 cabins. Also showers, laundry room, and office. I lived in a little apartment above the laundry, and it was great, really. Hired a few people to help out. Townies and a few transient types who'd head down south or to the ski resorts for winter work. But then, one day, this guy comes in the office with a photo on his phone. He was staying at the farthest RV spot from the office. I can't remember, but he had some kind of camper trailer, maybe even an old pop-up. He was staying in with his girlfriend. Older guy, 60-ish. I figured he was retired, but I didn't think about it too much. Lots of people come and go, and most don't stay more than a week. This guy had been there a couple days, I think. I'd been working on payroll for the week, worrying as usual about whether I had too many people on staff and how I was going to make it through the winter. From November to April, I catch a few odd jobs in town, like driving one of the county snowplows, but it's never easy. When this guy walked in, I felt a cold breeze. Maybe not a breeze, more like a little freeze in my gut. Made no sense because when he checked in, the dude was friendly enough talking about the weather, hiking, photography. That was his hobby. I figured he just wanted to complain that the washer ate his quarters, something like that. So I smiled and said hi, and he said, "I got something to show you." He had a laptop computer under his arm, and he put it on the counter, opened it up, and a photo filled the screen. It was dark. I had no idea what I was looking at. "You see those red eyes?" he said. I looked closer, and maybe I saw 2 red dots off to the side of the blurry trees. I guess they were. "Maybe," I said. "Wish I could have got a better shot," he said. "That there's a Mothman, I'm sure of it." So he started to tell this story about how he got up early wanting to walk down to the overlook to get a photo of the sunrise. He heard something like huge wings flapping and turned around. Through the trees he saw this man-shaped thing, only it had huge wings and no face. Like where the face should have been, there was nothing except these red eyes. He grabbed the camera from around his neck and got off a shot at it just before it flew off into the sky. He wanted to try for another picture, but the sky was so dark that he knew he wouldn't get anything. "Wish I'd thought to take a video," he said. "The sound of those wings would have picked up on the mic for sure." I didn't really believe him. I'd never even heard of Mothman before. I figured he'd just seen a hawk or something. Lots of them out there. The next day, he and his girlfriend took off, and I pretty much forgot about it. A couple of weeks later, though, things got weird. People would come and set up and leave the next day. They never said why, they'd just break their reservations and go. We were losing so much money that I was sure I'd never have enough for winter. Even the employees started quitting. Finally, after a couple weeks of this, I cornered Jimmy, who runs the laundry and shower rooms, cleans, collects the quarters, fills the machines, all that. "They're scared of Mothman," he said. "Oh, come on," I said. "That's crazy." He showed me a picture on his phone, but it just looked like grainy blackness. He told me he wasn't scared because he'd gotten a special hoodoo bag to ward away spirits, so it stayed away from him. The photo, he said, was from Bob, who used to cut the grass at the campground. Bob quit the week before. I wasn't scared of Mothman, but I was scared I'd never make any money off the place again. Then one couple came with a small tent, and I gave them the farthest campsite near the pond. On the day they were supposed to leave, Jimmy found all their things still there, but they were gone. We waited a day, and they still hadn't returned. We called the county sheriff and he took the stuff for evidence. No sign of them. Before we let anyone else have that site, I went out and looked at it. The sheriff guys had tromped all over it. But off near the woods, I saw some weird markings in the dirt. They were in a kind of line like tracks, but claw-like sort of. I looked up what moths' feet look like, and they could have been big moth feet. I don't know, I wasn't really sure. Anyway, I was tired of not knowing what was going on, so one day I got up really early and went to the edge of the campground where it meets the woods and just stood there looking for a while. You know how your eyes take a while to get used to the dark, and when they do, you slowly start to see more. That happened, and then I saw something standing there at the edge of the woods. It was pretty far away, but I saw the red eyes. There was a huge, loud flapping sound, and then the thing was gone. That's when I decided to sell the campground and move to Florida. I live in Oklahoma City, but my family's got a couple of mobile homes down in Broken Bow. I go see them whenever I have a long weekend or something, and one Friday I had Monday off for a holiday, so I was getting my stuff together. Anyway, I live in a little 6-unit apartment complex. 3 units on the top floor and 3 on the bottom. Mine's the corner of the bottom. When you go out the door, there's a concrete slab that runs the length of it, and we put out plastic chairs or plants on it. I wanted to get going early, so I walked out of my apartment before the sun rose, carrying my duffel over my shoulder. There are a few lights on the outside of our building, but some of them are always burned out. That day, the one in front of my neighbor's place, the guy in the middle, his was out. But in the dimness of the not-so-bright bulb in front of the next unit, I saw something hunkered down near the door. It looked like a smallish person, but naked. Skinny, too. I could see the rib cage through this creepy pale skin. Its mouth was open and looked like a big old hole. The more I looked, the less human it seemed. The eyes were black like they were holes too, and it had no expression. It just stared at me, and then I heard this clicking nose. Weird, like maybe someone squeezing one of those dog clickers over and over. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and then I figured out this thing was making the noise. Maybe with its mouth, but I really couldn't tell. I yelled, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was trying to not sound scared, but it didn't really work. At least I was loud, though. The thing kind of flinched and started to back away from the door. It was still hunched down and like crawling on all fours. "Go away," I said. I wanted to run, but I was afraid it could get in the neighbor's door, and I didn't want it to do that. I didn't know what it would do if it did get in there, but I had a feeling it wouldn't be anything good. 1 second it was backing away, and the next it was gone. That thing was fast. I got in my car and ripped out of that parking lot quick. When I got to my brother's trailer in Broken Bow, it was mid-morning and he was out feeding the chickens. He asked me what the heck was wrong with me because he could see I was shaken up. Our family's part Choctaw, and they do believe in some weird stuff, so I wasn't surprised that after I told him what I saw, he said, "The rake." "It was hanging around your apartment?" he said. "That's bad." "Yeah, why?" I said, trying to act not scared again. "You got to talk to Gamma," he said. I didn't want to tell our grandma about it, but I guessed he was right. Once he was done feeding the chickens, we went off to her trailer just down the road. Gamma lives with another old lady, and they spend most of their time making beaded stuff for tourists. They were sitting out from their trailer shelling peas when we got there. "Gamma, I seen the rake," I said. Her old lady friend Patty dropped the pea she was shelling and then picked it back up and tossed it in the plastic tub. "You got a dream catcher in your room?" Gamma asked me. "No, I don't got one of them tourist things," I said. "Why would I?" "Welp, you need one," she said and shoved her pea basket toward Patty. We went inside, and she started getting stuff out of her stash of craft stuff. I couldn't believe I was even doing this. Seemed pretty silly, but then, that rake was one scary thing, so I went along with it since I didn't know how else to keep it away. "Where you seen it?" she asked while she strung string and beads on a wooden circle. "Outside my apartment," I said. "Actually, my neighbor's apartment." She looked at me and said, "They need one too." "What about the other units?" I asked. "How many?" she said. I told her and she said, "Get to work." I'm no craft person, but by the time we finished all 6 of the dream catchers, I was getting pretty good at it. She put them in a bag and said, "Go bring them home." "Wait, I was going to stay the weekend," I said. She gave me her look, and you don't argue with Gamma's look. I took the bag and left. I felt pretty silly, but I knocked on everyone's door and handed out the dream catchers. Told them to hang it over their beds like Gamma said. They looked at me weird, but took them, all except Steve on the top floor. He didn't answer. I knew he was there because his little sedan was in the lot. Plus, I could see a light on. I left the dream catcher by the door. Maybe it would still work there. I went into my apartment and hung mine over the bed, but I sure didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about that creepy rake hanging around outside the building. Over the next few days, Steve's car didn't move. Normally, he goes to work in the morning and comes back around 6, but it just sat there. After a week, I saw his door was open and the landlord was there. I asked him what happened, and he said Steve split. Left all his stuff. I didn't see the dream catcher anywhere. Personally, I think the rake got him. I'm leaving that dream catcher over my bed. It had been a long day, and a particularly weird one at that. Things at work kept seemingly disappearing and then showing up in odd places. My computer screen kept flickering on and off, and twice I lost work before I could save it. The last thing of the day was an electric pencil sharpener not working for me. On top of that, I just felt drained. My energy level was just non-existent all day, in fact, all week. I would wake up in the middle of the night. I don't know why, but there was this feeling I kept having. I can't really explain it. I know that sounds odd, but I just can't bring it to words. Maybe dread was the closest I could relate it to. Maybe that's too cliché, I don't know. People had begun to notice how tired I looked. Dark rings around my eyes that were more often than not bloodshot. I'd forget things, lose my temper at odd times. I was a mess, really. After work, I came home and just dropped onto the couch. I didn't have any energy to do anything, really. I turned on the TV and flipped through the channels. I didn't even have energy for that. I just left it on something and then I began to drift off, I guess. I don't remember. That's when it happened. I was just lying on the couch. I remember opening my eyes and feeling strange all of a sudden. My arms had goosebumps and I had a feeling of slight panic. I tried to get up, but I couldn't. I can't really explain why. My body just wouldn't move for me. Suddenly it felt like there were hands on my shoulders and something was holding me down. I tried to move. I remember I kicked my legs a little, but this force just held me down. It felt like fingers digging into my shoulders, and I couldn't catch my breath. I swore for a second I saw the outline of a face, not details or anything, just the faint outline of a face's features. Deep sunk eyes, sunken cheeks, a mouth open wide like it was inhaling something over me. I couldn't catch my breath. I started to really panic, and that made me move more. I started moving my shoulders, my arms, trying to push whatever it was that was on top of me. I could feel it holding me, but I couldn't feel it when I kicked up towards where it should be. Suddenly it let go of me, and I jump up off the couch. The door to the room slammed shut, and I can't explain it, but then I felt alone. I was covered in a cold sweat, and I was feeling dizzy. I started to walk towards the kitchen when the TV suddenly shut off, then on again, the volume turning up higher and higher. I covered my ears with my hands and tried desperately to turn it down with the remote. The TV turned off, and it felt like something knocked me over. I fell to the floor, and I could swear something jumped on top of me, pinning me down. I had this huge pressure on my chest. I couldn't breathe. I tried to get up to call out, but I couldn't. The room began to spin, and then everything went dark. I woke up 3 hours later. I got my keys and ran out the door to my car. I didn't know what else to do, so I drove to the hospital. Apparently, I looked pretty bad because they took me in immediately and hooked me up to fluids and had me in a bed. 3 bags of saline and 48 hours of uninterrupted sleep, and I could feel somewhat normal again. The doctors and nurses asked me what had happened to me. What could I tell them? I didn't know what to say. After hours of not saying anything, that's when they had the psychiatrist come in. My story came to me immediately when that happened. It was work. I wasn't sleeping. I was overworking myself. I was consuming too much caffeine. I tried to make it sound as normal as possible. I don't know if the doctor believed me or not. They kept me for another 3 days. When I was released, it took me a long time to go home. I drove around for a while, went to a restaurant to eat, but eventually I made my way home. I sat in my driveway, my hands clenched the steering wheel, and I saw something in my house. I saw it move past the curtains, a dark silhouette that suddenly dropped out of sight. I tried to take a picture, but nothing came out on my camera phone. I left right after that. I drove 12 hours to my parents' house in Tennessee. I didn't know what else to do. I told them everything, the whole story, and prayed I didn't sound like a crazy person. I must have, though. I don't know what my father thought. My mother seemed to believe me, and I stayed at my parents' house for a few weeks. That was that I was moving immediately. I don't know what happened, but I wasn't staying in that house. As soon as I could, I had it up for sale and got my stuff out as fast as possible. We did it during the day and as fast as humanly possible. I spent as little time as possible in that house. Things happened to the movers and my parents as well. Things would disappear in the house. The movers felt uncomfortable, but maybe that was because they kept seeing me. I'm sure I couldn't hide my fear as well as I should have. I moved back in with my parents after that, but I kept track of the house. Eventually, it went to a married couple. Months went by and nothing seemed to happen. I still have nightmares, still can't sleep at night. I don't know what happened. I can't explain it. Nothing like it has happened to me since. I hope it never does again.